Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast. Today, we'll be talking about Utah public lands. There's actually a lawsuit on the street. And I was driving through southern Utah and saw a billboard that said, "Stand for your lands." So, of course, with anything you see on a ad on the highway, I pretty suspect on. But I will say, I was pretty encouraged to look up the website standforourlands.utah.gov, and there's actually a pending lawsuit. So this is going to be, I wanted to get this out really quick so that way we could see how this develops, because I'm very curious. And I'm going to flash a few graphics up on the screen, and the first one that I thought was interesting was looking at how much land is federally controlled in the United States. And if you look at this map, it seems like it's all the western states that deal with the majority of federally controlled lands. So in Utah, it's nearly 70% of the state is controlled by the feds. And this includes the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Defense, Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service, of course, our wonderful National Park Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and a multitude of other agencies. So obviously Utah does have a lot of federal lands because we have amazing country that we want to make sure is enjoyed by everyone. We also want to make sure it's managed appropriately. And the shocker for me was not the fact that 70% of Utah was federally managed. The next graphic I'm going to show you is that 18.5 million acres are lands in a lawsuit. And I'm like, well, that's curious. The other 18.8 million are, not in a lawsuit, and they're all national parks, monuments, forests, and wilderness areas. So the feds manage those areas appropriately. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, this is like, over 37 million acres of land in Utah. I mean, that's absolutely massive. And then it's pretty much split down the middle. This land's unappropriated BLM lands accounts for 18.5 million. And basically what unappropriated means is there's no active use or management of those lands. So I'm going to look more into that because that just didn't seem to quite land right. So I'm very curious to dig into that unappropriated lands purposes. And there's a good video on the website which does a great job. I mean, it kind of, obviously it's the governor, it's the lieutenant governor, it's the attorney general for the state, and the state is unified in launching this lawsuit against the feds because they're saying the states can manage those lands better than the feds. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting argument, but they, for sure, if the lands are unappropriated and there's absolutely no management of resources or other activities happening, then, that's obviously something I think that I'd like to investigate and learn more about. In the video, they state that there are certain areas where the unappropriated status or those BLM lands, they basically shut them down. So there's basically a huge impact on the local economy and also everyone who likes to go and use those trails and use those resources. There's been areas where they literally cannot no longer use the trails, and that just seems like a huge red flag to me. So a very interesting lawsuit. We'll drop a few links. Next week, we're going to get more into the fact sheet and more into the specific details about the lawsuit. But I thought I would leave you with this. What is the purpose of the lawsuit? I'm going to read this directly from the standforourland.utah.gov website. The sole purpose of the lawsuit is to answer the constitutional question of whether or not the federal government can retain unappropriated lands in a state indefinitely over the state's objection. So they want to take this all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States to determine, hey, this unappropriated land, what are you doing with it? And can you just hold that indefinitely till the end of time and not against the state's objection? So the state wants to see public lands remain in public hands and available to all Utahns and visitors of all ages and abilities to be managed for multiple uses for current and future generations. And obviously that's the key. I hope that through this lawsuit and the court will come down is what is the best for the future generations to come and enjoy this land. And there's going to be a lot of discussion on, what could those uses be? Because there will also be agricultural influences, grazing cattle. I read that there was a $35 million investment in the state to improve the grazing infrastructure for the cattle industry. There would also be solar and wind power, I'm sure, and then there'd also be management of the natural resources like wildlife, and that would potentially have a huge impact on improving the amount of habitat and the sustainment of how many animals we could support in the state. I'm a big fan of that. The state encourages Utahns and visitors to support public lands being managed locally by the state of Utah. So that is the takeaway today. We're going to dig more into this lawsuit. But please go and check out standforourland.utah.gov, and I'd be very curious to see how this is developing in your states. Maybe we'll do a little tour of the western states, because you look at the map, I'll flash it up again, 70% is managed by the feds, and 18.5 million out of 37 million is unappropriated. What is the plan there? There's literally nothing. So, all right, let's dig into it more and see how this one develops. Until next time.